recognize the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Tactical Air and Land Forces, gentlelady from California, Ms. Sanchez, for her comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to also thank Chairman Turner for his leadership on the subcommittee this year. Under his leadership, the Tactical Air and Land Forces Subcommittee worked in a very bipartisan manner to develop a set of legislation, report language, and funding recommendations that will help to ensure that our troops have the equipment they need, make critical investments in the future, and also cut wasteful spending done by the DoD. For example, the Chairman's mark strongly supports the budget request for all our major programs in this subcommittee's jurisdiction. It provides $8.3 billion for the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program, $3.8 billion for Army aviation upgrades, $1.4 billion for the Ospreys, and it provides $997 million for the U.S. Marine Corps equipment. However, the Chairman's mark also provides additional funding for programs judged by this subcommittee to be high priorities necessary to get troops equipment they need and to provide vital industrial production lines. And, Mr. Chairman, during the year, we held several hearings with respect to our infrastructure and what it would take to continue to ensure that we had those industrial production lines, even as we are downsizing as we move forward. Specifically, the Chairman's mark increases funding in the following areas. It provides an additional $250 million for the National Guard and Reserve equipment accounts. It increases funding for Army ground aerial vehicles by, Army ground vehicles by $340 million. It increases funding for unmanned aerial vehicles by $59 million. It increases funding for body armor, very important. We also did some studies with respect to our women's body armor, etc. It increases that line item by $80 million. And finally, it adds $450 million for continued production of the Growler aircraft for the Navy. In addition to the funding increases, it's important to note that the mark also recommends $615.7 million in funding reductions in this subcommittee's jurisdiction. Those reductions are always difficult, but we did a lot of oversight. We thought about this, we reviewed everything, and we think that it's the responsibility of this subcommittee to take a look at programs that are working, programs that are needed, and to phase out what we don't need, etc. And finally, the Chairman's mark includes legislation that provides additional oversight on some of the major programs. The Army's Airborne Reconnaissance Low Aircraft, of course, the F-35 or our Joint Strike Fighter, the only production plane this country will have for the next 20 or 30 years, and the Army's Armored Multi-Vehicle Program. And there are also two provisions that provide additional authorities for the Secretary of Defense regarding military airspace and counter-IED efforts. And overall, Chairman Turner has developed a solid set of legislation, report language, and funding changes for these members to consider, and I urge our members to support the Tactical Air and Land Forces Subcommittee mark as presented.